Welcome again, everyone, to this today's webinar from the International Solar Energy Society. Thank you for joining us today. I'll give everyone a few more minutes to join as we just started the broadcast. So hello again and welcome everyone. We've got a few people still coming online, so I'll give everyone a few more minutes to join as we begin today's webinar. The topic is 175 gigawatts of renewable power, including addition of 100 gigawatt of solar in India by the year 2022, challenges and present status. So thank you everyone who's joined us already. Give everyone a few more minutes to sign in. We've got people from all over the world coming and joining us today, so just hold on a few more minutes until we get everyone in the webinar before we start. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and begin. More people will start to join us during the session, and that's fine. For those of you who are already on board, thank you very much for joining us today. This webinar is going to address the topic of India and what's going on and all the exciting projects and goals being set in India to reach 175 gigawatts of renewable power, including 100 gigawatts of solar by the year 2021, the challenges and the present status. We have over almost 400 people who registered for this webinar, so we're not quite at that number yet. Those of you who have joined us, we welcome you, and we look forward to your participation and questions during the Q&A session later. If you have any questions, you can already start typing them in. So before we begin, I would like to just take a few minutes to inform you about what the International Solar Energy Society is and what we do. The International Solar Energy Society is a nonprofit UN-accredited membership NGO. Our vision is to achieve 100% renewable energy for all used efficiently and wisely. We represent a diverse membership of academics, researchers, energy practitioners, consultants, businesses, students, and advocates. We work with like-minded organizations from countries around the world to advance the renewable energy transformation. By becoming a member of ISIS, you're helping to support 100% renewable energy, the 100% renewable energy transformation. This webinar today will be recorded. The recording will be available on our website for a few days for you to view. After that, the presentations that are available and the recording will be posted to the ISIS members area. If you're an ISIS member, you can access the members area by logging in at join.isis.org. In the top level menu, you will see the library of webinars. If you're not yet a member and would like to join, we offer and welcome you to sign up anytime. You can not only have access to the webinars, but you can also receive our publications, our newsletter, have access to the ISIS member directory, and receive discounts at selected ISIS and supported events. As I've said before, we do have a question and answer session planned for during this webinar after the presentations. You are welcomed and encouraged to ask questions at any time throughout the webinar. To ask a question, just simply select the question pane on your screen and type in your question. We ask you to please specify who your question is directed to. That'll help us as we moderate the question and answers. And we hope that all the questions will be addressed, but if they're not, we apologize already. We also encourage you to go to our LinkedIn page and continue the question and answers there and continue the discussion. Just one word about how we make these possible. ISA's webinars, as I mentioned before, we're a nonprofit membership organization, so we rely on sponsorship, donations, and the support of our members to continue hosting these free webinars. If you're interested in becoming a member or a sponsor, please visit our website or don't hesitate to get in touch with us directly. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's moderator, Mr. Rabindra Sadpathy. Rabindra specializes in solar PV power through his many years in working in electrical engineering. He has been working in solar PV industry since 1984. He has worked with the world's leading solar PV companies such as BP Solar India, Siemens Solar, Shell Solar, Solar World, Trina Solar, and any others in various functions, such as in system design and engineering, quality project management, sales and business, and in various leadership roles. He is currently Chief Executive Officer of the Renewable Energy Power of the Imami Group Power in India, and he is also a board member of ISIS. We want to thank Rabindra for helping to organize this webinar today, and it's an interesting topic, and we appreciate his efforts and the speakers to help put this together. Now, Rabi, I'll hand the floor over to you, and you can begin with the introduction of the speakers. Thanks.
Thank you, Jenny. I'll just give you a brief on the topic. The topic we're chosen for the webinar today, the 175 gigawatt of renewable power, which includes 100 gigawatt of solar power in India by 2022, the challenges and the present status. As all of you know, this 175 gigawatt comprises of four segment of renewable power, which is 100 gigawatt of solar, 6 gigawatt of wind, which is the utility scale, 5 gigawatt of small hydro, 10 gigawatt of bioenergy. As you know that for this 175 gigawatt of renewable power, it will need roughly 200 billion for investment, which would include funds for manufacturing and infrastructure. Of course, for the direct investment for the power plants would be to the tune of $150 billion. If you look at the current RE power capacity as of July 16, which stands at 44.24 gigawatt, has seen a tremendous growth of 39.6% since July 2014. And for this year, for the last year, 2015 and 16, we have seen a remarkable RE development in India, which has seen the highest ever solar and wind power capacity addition in India, which stands at 3.01 gigawatt in solar and 3.42 gigawatt in wind power, while the solar power capacity has exceeded 8 gigawatt excess. Several steps have been taken by the government to promote renewable power, such as development of solar parks, various other schemes, ultra mega solar power projects, rooftop schemes, and other for the standalone and microgrid systems, which is promoting the RE power. This webinar, which has 4 experts joining us, whom I'll introduce in a second, shall focus on what needs to be done now and over the next years to achieve this target, while they need to do the introspection on the present status of RE sector and what needs to be done next. Our first speaker is Mr. Santosh Kamath. Mr. Santosh Kamath is a partner at KPMG in India, and he leads the renewable energy area. He has a postgraduate management from the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. Mr. Santosh has led multiple engagements in solar power involving policy developments, strategy formulations, hand-holding assistance, and transaction advisory for variety clients, including central and state governments, multilateral agencies, and private companies in India. He is a well-known person who has been involved in several aspects of RE development. And our next speaker is Mr. Vikas Davra. Mr. Vikas Davra is a Senior Managing Director in the Investment Banking team at S Securities, which is a 100% subsidiary of S Bank. Mr. Vikas has over 18 years of investment banking experience, having worked across all sectors at S Bank. Mr. Vikas has led over 60 successful merger and acquisitions, PE and ECM transactions in domestically and overseas. Additionally, Mr. Vikas leads the Sustainable Investment Banking division of which focuses on providing investment banking and advisory services to businesses operating in the area of renewable energy, environmental services, and social and financial inclusions. He is also joined by his colleague, Mr. Danish Verma, who is the Director of Sustainable Investment Banking Division of S Securities. Mr. Danish has over 11 years of experience in business consulting and corporate finance in renewable energy, power, and infrastructure sector. In his current role as Director SIB, he has been involved in merger and acquisition of the two operational wind assets, IPO of a wind turbine company, and a successful green bond raise. Dennis has done his MBA in finance and have worked with Kotak Investment Banking, Ernst & Young, CRISIL in the infrastructure advisory. And our last but not the least speaker is Mr. Satya Kumar, who has a track record of more than 30 years of work experience, 70 years devoted to project management of solar power and clean energy. Mr. Satya is the founder and managing director of Sri Shakti Alternative Energy, a clean energy consulting and solution company incubated by IFC Washington under the Photovoltaic Market Transformation Initiative. Since then, innovation and market transformation are the DNA of the company. Satya has handled various consultancy projects for UNIDO, UNICEF, ADB, and World Bank. His wide range of expertise in solar power plant projects include its full-scale implementation, project development, financial closure, assessment studies, reports, determination of tariff for solar power plants, policy analysis, and feasibility report, among others. So we have a diversity of the speakers. I would now invite Mr. Santosh Kamath to deliberate on the topic assigned to him. Mr. Santosh, please. Mr. Santosh will be discussing the overall scenario of 170 GW renewable target for India by 2022 with present status and action plans. Mr. Santosh, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rabindra. I have a short presentation on the topic. As the title of the topic is Opportunities and Challenges for India's 100 gigawatt solar vision. At the outset, I must say that I'm very happy to be here, and thank you to the International Solar Energy Society for inviting me. I will cover the topic in a few slides, and then I will to answer any questions. So, yeah. I hope my screen is visible. Just moving on.
Yes, we can. Santosh, yes, we can see your screen. It looks fine.
You can see the screen.
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, yeah. Right. Just a breakup of the 100 gigawatt target that the government of India has set. The breakup is approximately 40% is on rooftop solar PV systems, 20% is in large solar parks, which would run into, say, 500 megawatts, 1,000 megawatts solar parks. There's 20% for largely rural related applications and small scale systems. and another 20% for central PSUs, which are the public sector undertakings and state public sector undertakings, and other smaller applications. So that's the approximate breakup of the 100 gigawatt target. Now, if one looks at the investment which is needed, and Rabindra already touched upon that, but approximately 46 billion US dollars would be required for the grid-connected projects, about 22 billion dollars for the solar parks, and a large sum of almost 53 billion for the rooftop projects. I've also given an indicative breakup between equity and debt, and this is assuming a 30-70 financing ratio between equity and debt. Just moving on to the next slide, where we give a breaks by the different states in India. India has got 29 states, and certain parts of India are very solar rich. This is the western and southern parts of India by and large, and we have given a breakup across the states there in the chart. Likewise, we have given a breakup for the solar rooftop target across states. Just moving on to the next slide. If you look at the last financial year ending March 2016, was an important year for India's solar sector. And we ended the year, and right now we have close to about 8 gigawatts. As of the latest position, we have close to 8 gigawatts of installed capacity. A lot of it got added in the last 18 months. Most of it got added in the last 18 months. And this is growing very fast. And equally, in this last year, we have seen a very significant fall in solar tariffs in line with global trends. And we have discovered solar prices which are sub-Indian currency 5 rupees, sub-Indian rupee 5 rupees per unit of electricity, which is approximately 7.5 US cents. So our solar prices have fallen below that level, and that's in a way an important benchmark for the Indian power sector. We have seen investment and entry of large foreign players into the Indian market, and I will touch upon that in a later slide. And equally, a lot of Indian conglomerates and business houses have got into the solar sector in India. The graph alongside also shows you some of the recent tariff trends, and you can see that it's come to about 7 US cents in some of the more recent bids. So in terms of the developers, I mentioned about a lot of foreign interest. Some of the prominent ones include SoftBank of Japan, there's Fortum, European player, First Solar of US, are some of the names. I mean, this is not an exhaustive list, but just to give an indication. Again, there are pure play renewable IPPs. These are some Indian names which you see there. They're all backed, many of them are backed by private equity investors, and including Goldman Sachs and some others. There are also some overseas strategic players. For example, Sembcorp has invested in some of these players. So there is a combination of strategic players as well as private equity backed renewable IPPs. Equally, there are Indian conglomerates which I mentioned: Tata, Adani, Hero, Aditya Birla, Shapoorji Pallonji, some of the other companies in this space. Now, coming to the rooftop solar space, which is an interesting space which is evolving. Now, our KPMG internal view is that we'll probably be somewhere around 10 gigawatts by 2020, in about 4 years from now. Currently, we are at about 740 megawatts. as of end of 2016, and we expect that to go up to about 10 gigawatts by around 2020. While this has been slow to grow, but of late in the last 6 to 8 months, we are seeing a lot of traction in this space, and it's becoming very attractive, especially for commercial and industrial customers, where the rooftop solar prices are more competitive than utility prices, and along with net metering support and tax benefits, it becomes a very attractive investment proposition. So we do expect to see this grow very fast as we go forward. Now coming to financing. Now what we do believe is that for rooftop solar, financing is going to be important. While so far we have seen financing coming in for utility scale projects and a lot of interest on that, but for rooftop solar projects, financing has been slower to come because there are a whole set of issues around that. But what we have shown here is that if you take a typical residential customer, then we have shown that the power bill, the utility power bill which he pays for a certain category, which is the high income residential customers, can be equal to an EMI on a 7-year loan, and that can almost match. So in this particular case, we have taken a scenario where a consumer consumes 700 units a month, and his power bill, on a levelized basis, considering 4% tariff escalation, is at around 6,000 rupees a month, whereas the EMI on a 7-year loan at 10.5% interest rate can be about 5,900 rupees. So clearly, the economics is there, provided the net metering support is extended, and which it is, and there are financing options available. So so this shows the economics for rooftop solar, which we believe is an important market going forward. What we would also like to show is that as we go forward and as storage costs come down, we do believe that that solar rooftop combined with battery storage could become economical for consumers compared to utility tariffs. That parity has not been achieved yet, but we think around 2022 that might be achieved, and assuming that the battery storage costs come down to about $200 per kilowatt hour. So in this graph, we have shown in the lower part of the slide that utility cost of supply could be about 6.97, whereas rooftop solar combined with partial storage can be at around 7.6 around 2022. So near break even. So so that's the interesting observation we see in terms of rooftop solar. Now, what are the challenges? So while the opportunity is very large, because India's power demand is growing at about 6% per year, and as we go forward, we believe a lot of the incremental supply would come from renewables, and KPMG view is that between now and 2025, roughly 40% of incremental supply will come from renewables, which is solar and wind. Therefore, that looks a very big opportunity for any investor. What we have now tried to show is what are some of the challenges. I list here 2 challenges. One is the financial health of the power distribution companies, and the second is the ability of the power grids to absorb vast amounts of renewable power. On the first one, the power utilities in India are making, many of the public-owned utilities are not financially very sound, and last year the total financial losses added up to almost $10 billion US. Now, this is a concern, and this has led to concerns about credit worthiness and ability to get paid for the investments made, and so on. Now, the government of India has recognized this, and they have formulated a scheme called UDAY, UDAY, which is a very important flagship program of the government of India as far as the power sector is concerned. What this tries to do is addresses the financial position of the power sector through a number of levers, and I've listed some of them here. First is improving the operational efficiency of the distribution utilities in terms of the network leakages of power which are not billed. So it seeks to address that through investments and through better governance mechanisms to control power theft. So that's one important lever. Second is reducing the cost of power, the thermal power, which is fairly expensive because of various reasons, including coal logistics reasons, coal logistics costs of coal, and efficiencies of some of the power plants. So this is sought to be addressed through some very innovative models, such as swapping or swapping of coal, or using coal in more efficient plants, and the government of India has come out with a scheme to enable that. There's better governance, and that is sought to be achieved through a better control mechanism, a better monitoring mechanism, and through the state governments having to take responsibility and accountability for the financial health of their distribution companies. And finally, there's debt restructuring, which is part of the UDAY scheme, which seeks to restructure the debt, and including the state government, taking over the debt of the companies. This is a very important program. The UDAY is a very success of UDAY is very important for the renewable targets to be met. As I mentioned, it targets to bring down the inefficiencies in the sector, a break even in 2 to 3 years for the utilities, a reduction of the network losses to 15%, reduction between the cost and the revenue, and the gap between the cost and the revenue, and all discoms to be profitable by 17-18. The second challenge which I would like to mention is the integration of renewables into the grid. And this simulation which we did for a southern state in India highlights the issue. So this is for May 2019, and what we have tried to do is that with solar and wind coming in, so there's approximately 4,000 megawatts of solar in that state, and there's approximately about again 2 to 3,000 megawatts of wind in that here. So what happens is that the thermal plants will have to cycle, will have to ramp up and down, and the minimum to maximum ratio comes to about 40%. So what that means is that coal plants will have to reduce their threshold minimum generation to about 40%, if the renewables have to be fully absorbed into the grid. Now, today, the coal plants are not able to do that. Their minimums are at around 60% or 70% in some cases. The regulator has now requires them to reduce it to 55%, but that would have to be lowered down further to about 40% by 2019 if we are to absorb all the renewables. Apart from that, the ramping rates have to be, the plants have to become more flexible to be able to absorb the renewable part. So this is the second challenge, and we would like all the states and the generators to be able to be prepared to meet this challenge. The Government of India has formed a task force and a committee to address this issue with very senior eminent people, including people from NTPC, the largest power generator in India, to be part of this committee to address this issue. Finally, I'll touch upon the commercial impact of renewables on the grid and on the conventional generators. And in our simulation, we find that in many states, the utilization or the plant load factor, or PLF as we call it, of conventional capacity will fall by about 15%, 15 percentage points. So to somewhere in the 60% range, or even lower, depending on the position of the plant in the merit order of dispatch. So we are going to routinely see dispatch of thermal plants coming to 50 to 60% range on an average. Now, Indian power plants are not used to that. They're more used to 70%, 80% dispatch. So this has a commercial impact in terms of unutilized capacities, and therefore the cost and the fixed cost on the grid would increase and has to be absorbed by the regulator, by the consumers. So that's the second commercial challenge that I see coming up. So to summarize, it's a great opportunity for India and for investors. It's a multi-billion, as we saw, somewhere in the region of 150 billion US dollar investment opportunity, and it's a great platform. We see great growth in India's renewable energy targets. India has also made a voluntary commitment at Paris to reduce its carbon intensity by 33% in terms of per capita or per dollar of GDP, carbon intensity by 33% by 2030. And renewables is a very important part of that strategy for India. Our per capita consumption levels are very low at about 1,000 units per capita. But as we grow, and looking at the government commitment, I'm optimistic that renewables is going to be a great story in India. So that opens up a great opportunity for all. Rooftop solar is a very interesting opportunity. It's not grown very much so far, but I do believe that going forward in the next 5 years, we will see this space opening up. In terms of challenges, I mentioned one is the DISCOM financial health. That is being addressed through the Uday program. And finally is the grid integration of renewables, which different stakeholders have to work towards. So with that, I conclude my presentation and open to any questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Santosh. Our next speaker is Mr. Vikas Daura. He's the MD at S Bank, and he'll be joined by his colleague, Mr. Danis Verma. Over to you, Mr. Vikas and Mr. Danis. And you'll be talking on the overall financial requirements for achieving 175 gigawatt renewables by 2022 with present financial arrangements and future requirements. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ravindra. Good afternoon to everybody. I think Santosh has set the stage for a very interesting conversation. And what I will do along with my colleague Danesh is to take the discussion forward based on Yes Bank's own experience in the industry in India over the last decade or so. And just to give you a little bit of background on where we are coming from, I'll just spend literally 30 seconds talking about Yes Bank. We are the 5th largest private sector bank in India and one of the pioneers, I would say, in lending and financing green energy. Till date, we have financed nearly 3.4 gigawatt of energy in wind and solar. And we have also done 3 rounds of green bonds. In fact, we were the first ones to do a green bond in India in February 2015, August 2015, and again as recently as September 2016, we've done 3 green bonds. 2 of them were supported by IFC and FMO. Besides that, we have also done 30 plus transactions in mergers and acquisitions and inbound advisory. And we are also working on the Indian equivalent of yieldcos called the INVIT structure. So based on all this, as we often say in an emerging market like India, sometimes the innovation in banking and finance is more important than the innovation in the labs. So I will just request my colleague Danesh to take you through a brief presentation talking about the challenges, risks, mitigants, and way forward for the renewable energy industry in India. Over to you, Danesh.
Yeah, thanks so much, Vikas. I think Santosh has anyways, laid the stage for what the solar, market and the market opportunity size. So, we'll just very quickly cover on this slide, obviously, the overall macro, the India story. So I guess all of you who are already logged in are already convinced about that, and that's why your interest. So, just to let you know, so India is expected to grow, more than 400 basis points higher than the average world growth rate over the next 2 years. That's the World Bank assumption. We still have a large portion of population which is yet to be urbanized, which would obviously result in demand, demand growth, in terms of electricity consumption. So 200 million population to be added, and then there is the entire smart cities campaign, which is again planned. So the macroeconomics are all in line. And since the time this new government took charge now, so somewhere around 2.5 years back, India has really emerged as the world's clean energy capital. We have increased our renewable, this government increased the renewable energy capacity targets 4x. Last year, as it has been said, we added record amounts of capacities of both wind and solar. We had a very, last year January, we had a very successful international investor summit, which was done by the Ministry of Renewable Energy, where where the government was successful in receiving over 300 gigawatts of investment commitments. Obviously, so this was given by both private as well as domestic Indian companies. There is a huge push towards transmission capacity augmentation. So there's some 38,000 Indian crores to be set up towards that. And obviously there is a huge push on the solar side in terms of the trending process. So nearly 21 gigawatts of solar projects tendered in FY16. EY does a renewable country attractiveness index. So India is now ranking number 3, next to only China and USA. So these are the targets. I think so. All of you have, these have been done. So at the last December COP21, India has made a commitment to achieve a 35% reduction in carbon emission and to generate at least 40% of our electricity from renewable sources by 2030. So all the government push and the policies are towards keeping those goals in mind. So this is exactly where we stand in terms of our 2022 target. So what we're trying to show you is on the supply side, obviously the government policy and the push is there. Even with a large amount of tendering, we still have a long way to go from nearly, let's say, 8 gigawatts in solar now to around 100 gigawatts. Similarly on the wind side, so there is scope to grow on the supply side. And I think more importantly, and we keep stressing this to all investors and developers who look at entering into India, there is a strong scope to grow on the demand side. India's per capita electricity consumption in units per year is still at around 1,000. So we are still 1/3 the world average. We are actually 1/4 of China. Among the BRIC nations, again, we are by far the lowest. And obviously, compared to the OECD and the developed nations, we are minuscule. So in that sense, sometimes some of the government statistics which comes out in terms of the existing power rates on the power exchange or in terms of some of the states, those tend to be misleading purely because a lot of the discoms today are not meeting their true demand. But the fact is, load shedding is a reality in India still in all tier 2, tier 3 towns. In fact, apart from Delhi and Bombay, you step out to any other major city in India and you will find at least 3 to 6 hours of load shedding. So there is a lot of unmet demand which is still there. There is a large portion of population which which is rural India in terms of villages which are still unelectrified. So I think any investor or developer who is looking to enter India should take it for granted that the demand for electricity in India is only set to grow, given our plus 7.5% economic growth rate, increased urbanization, the Make in India push towards industrialization, and the strong service economy growth. So what are the key macro drivers which are helping renewable energy grow in India? And very clearly, so obviously it's a very favorable risk-return profile. Yes, India has its own challenges in terms of emerging market risk, in terms of project execution, but compared to a conventional project or let's say a coal-based project, which takes some 5 years to kind of set up, a renewable energy project, solar or wind, can be set up in relatively very small time, which effectively means that those risks are lesser. It's an extremely scalable business model. This has attracted the larger the larger corporates, the smaller guys, you can start with something as small as 1 megawatt, or you can go to as large as 500 megawatt solar park. There is a continued thrust by the government. And obviously, in terms of grid parity, I think that we have seen a huge amount now that solar rates in India are today already at grid parity. We see the emergence of business models which are not linked to subsidy, or which are not dependent upon any preferential tariff per se. So therefore, a huge, this has de-risked the sector a lot. Let me just skip very quickly through the next slide, because again, I think Santosh has given you some bit of overview. So globally also, I think so what we are seeing is solar is attracting the largest share of new investment in renewable energy. It has by far overtaken wind. India is also going on the same path. As of August 16, we already have now an installed capacity base of 8.1 gigawatts. Just to let you know, so this pie chart just gives you a split. So we have what is called as a federal PPAs in India, which is essentially the central government PPAs. We have the state policy, which is the state discoms, and then we have some other capacities, which include some of the RECs and some of the group captives. In terms of states, if you look at Rajasthan and Gujarat were the two states on the western side of India which took a lead towards installation of solar, but now we have seen the southern states really catch up, and actually Tamil Nadu has now displaced Rajasthan as the single largest installed capacity. We continue to, so in India, solar resource is pretty much evenly spread all across the country. So barring the northeast of the country, essentially solar is pretty well spread. So in that sense, most states offer a very good opportunity for installing solar in India. Solar parks has been talked about. I think so. Again, this is an extremely good initiative by the government, to attract international investors. This takes away the key risk which a foreign investor or a developer associates with doing business in India, which is land acquisition. So here you have a situation where the land, the evacuation, etc., is already built up. So therefore the only things left for a developer to do is essentially to come, do the equipment procurement, which is anyways, let's say, imported modules and international equipment, and essentially bring in financing. So this allows even the first-time developers in India, people who, or first-time foreign companies in India, to easily bid for capacities, with very sure certainty on the difficult execution parts of land and evacuation. Just a bit of tariffs, this is again, just to see the tariff trends. Yes, they have been on a declining trend, in line with both the international module prices falling, as well as continued interest of new players in the sector, the competitive intensity in the Indian reverse auction. So India does not really now support too much of a feed-in tariff mechanism for solar. India actually has a reverse auction mechanism. We have seen competitive intensity going up, and lots of new players keep adding. So yes, there has been a reduction in tariff, which is actually good in terms of de-risking of the sector, because now there is very little motivation for a discom to actually not pay, because these tariffs are essentially less than their average cost of power any which way. There are obviously two sets of tariff levels. One is the solar parks, the other is the non-solar park. Obviously, the solar parks capacities tend to get bid more competitively higher because of the lesser risks around land acquisition and execution, which are, with this. And I think so. Obviously, since July, since the Chinese capacity addition hit a cliff, the international module prices have seen a deep swing, and we believe that possibly below 4 rupee tariffs in India should be a reality before the end of this calendar year. The next slide essentially is on the on the market mapping. So if you effectively see, essentially the solar landscape, the solar IPP landscape is dominated by the PE-backed solar platform. These and you have all range of international investors already present in India. So you have Renew, Goldman Sachs, you have Kiran, you have ADB, you have IFC, you have Piramal Capital. So these are all investors who have supported platforms. On the distributed side, on the distributed solar side, we are again seeing action now. I Squared Capital has has committed money, and then there is an Australian fund which has also going to put money in Applied Solar, which is a telecom and an off-grid solar player. The global IPPs are all here: NL, Photon, EDF, First Solar, NG, through Solar Direct. The Indian IPPs or the Indian traditional utilities are there. For example, the Adani, the Tata. New Indian corporate players are also coming in. The business conglomerates of Mahindra, Aditya Birla Group, Hero Futures, these are there. And obviously, a lot of the foreign players have also adopted a partnership route to enter into India. EDF did it with Acme, although that partnership has now been dissolved. You have Statkraft coming in with BLP on the distributed side, and obviously, NG and Applied Solar are also participating. So again, you have a range of Indian players, private equity players, as well as strategic players which are already in India. So let me just very quickly come to exactly for an international player, what all opportunities this sector hold for you. So obviously the foremost big opportunity is the greenfield opportunity. We expect there's a huge tendering pipeline expected over the next 2 years. We have a long journey to go through to 100 gigawatts. One can look at bidding in this. We believe going forward, obviously the share of state PPAs is gradually increased. Solar parks, as we mentioned, is a big positive. Private PPAs, or essentially the B2C direct segment, as Santosh mentioned, is again a big segment given that solar has already reached grid parity. In terms of trends and tariffs, yes, we have seen. So what this graph essentially we have tried to very roughly indicate is what kind of equity IRRs, or essentially levered IRRs that we believe that these auctions are throwing up. Yes, there have been in the past concerns around aggressive bidding. The fact that the tariffs have in some cases fallen more than the project cost or the module prices fall. But again, we have seen some very credible players, and obviously essentially what we are seeing is it's becoming a game of capital, cost of capital. So larger the players and the larger their ability, the bigger their ability to channelize low cost of capital, that's a key differentiating factor which is emerging in bids after bid. Just for the financial investors and for the financial guys out there, so what, let's say 14% is essentially 14% is a long-term Indian rupee levered IRR on a FCFE basis, on a hold to maturity kind of thing. So this is a full 25-year long term. So you may have certain upsides in addition to that, which we can, which we'll discuss in a slide after that. So this is about the greenfield opportunity, right? Anybody who has a, anybody who is a developer who has a mandate to add fresh capacity, so that's a huge opportunity space for them. There's also a huge opportunity on the brownfield and the M&A side. Today, as we speak today, there are around 15 gigawatts of capacity which is yet to be constructed. So these are PPAs which have been allotted, but so some of these capacities is yet to achieve financial closure. Some of this capacity is already midway constructing. Our rough indication estimates that around 10 to 15% of these licenses may be bid by players, one-off players or smaller players, or financially weak players, and so therefore capital raising may be a challenge. So once again, there is an opportunity to acquire some of these licenses. This, for an international player, again, this helps you escape the uncertainty of the bidding market. You very well know exactly what the PPA tariff already bid is. The key, obviously, being that there are equity lock-in considerations. So one needs to respect those, or essentially find some creative structuring option. Then that's something which we do on the financial structuring side, and obviously the timeline. So typically, post a PPA, it has been signed. One typically is working somewhere around a 12 to a 15 month timeline for COD. So obviously the deal needs to be concluded before that, and the new player needs to infuse funds and get on to the construction pretty quickly. The other big opportunity is on the acquisition side. So as we mentioned, India has already now incumbent installed capacity of 8 gigawatts. Which means that we have huge. Now a lot of these players have not been able to scale up. As I mentioned, it's becoming a cost of capital game. So a lot of these players who have decided that they will not be able to scale up to the IPOable capacity or a monetizable size are out in the market to sell. And sometimes, in fact, if I go to my next slide, ideally speaking, an operating asset should earn you lower than a greenfield asset because of lower risk. But in India, we are actually seeing the opposite. So So 13 to 14, maybe you earn an equity return on a greenfield. On the operating asset, deals are actually available at 15 to 16%, and that's because there is a huge quantum of such players out in the market to sell. Distributed solar, Santosh has already covered, so let me not spend time. Let me just quickly now rush to my slides on the financing side. So these are some of the key trends that we see. On the equity side, obviously we have seen private equity players coming in. We are yet to see Indian capital markets take off. But however, we have seen some foreign, we have seen some players looking at it. So as we speak today, an Indian solar IPP developer is evaluating a listing on the New York Stock Exchange. We have some London AIM listed entities which are already present in India, and we have the Indian version of the Yield Coast Infra Investment Trust, that are about to take off in India. On the debt side, obviously we have banks, led by Yes Bank on the, which can do corporate financing, project financing, and mezzanine. We have the Indian development finance institutions dedicated to the power sector. We are seeing the overseas financing is limited to the buyer's credit and the supplier's credit from a forex portion. And obviously what we see as a big differentiator coming forward now is the debt capital market. Green bonds. We were the first to start green bonds, so green bond, we are seeing the developers being drawn, and hopefully we have also done some of the credit enhanced asset level green bonds. So I think so again, debt capital markets is becoming an increasing way of getting long-term things. So what are some of the key triggers that we are looking at, which we see will continue, which we'll see for these flows to continue, is obviously improved macroeconomic environment on the equity side, resumption of capital market that's yet to happen. We have yet to see a large Indian capital market listing yet on the IPP models, grid parity based models. M&A and operational assets, it's a reality that will help up free some incumbent capital and the yield investors. And similarly, on the debt side, we are seeing lenders being more and more comfortable with the technology. We are seeing longer term tenures. We are ourselves doing 18-year tenures on a greenfield assets. There's a concept of securitization also which is coming in, and green bonds which are which are there. In terms of risk, this is just something which we did, we put off. So as a lender's perspective, and and our experience of financing more than 1.5 gigawatts, we essentially see that land acquisition and right-of-way issues, that's the biggest risk that we have seen in our project and the evacuation side. So therefore, once again, highlighting the importance of solar park for an international player or peak players who do not have a deep local presence. Delay in payments of discounts has been sometimes an issue, supplier performance and resource assessment, and delay in signing PPA are other smaller risks. This is my final slide, which I'd like to spend time. So, so we talked about a 12 to 14% base equity kind of a return on the asset level, but we believe there are ways that one can target a closer to a 20% return. These involve doing some open access PPAs which are slightly higher. There would be an improved financing option, possibly post commissioning you can refinance at a later rate. Most of the Indian IPPs are also doing in-house EPC, so they tend to capture some of the EPC margins, which again helps. And obviously, once you have reached a certain portfolio size of, let's say, 500 megawatts or above, then you can look at essentially monetization event. It could be an IPO, a yield co, or a strategic sale, essentially replacing, essentially bringing a low return expecting yield investor. So all of these should essentially take you to above 18% kind of a return, again on an equity IRR Indian rupee basis. So I'll just stop here, and again we'll take questions at the end of it.
Thank you, Mr. Bikas and Mr. Danis. Now I would request Mr. D.V. Satyakumar to discuss the present technology deployments and other technologies to supplement the efforts to achieve the 175 gigawatt renewables. Mr. Satya, please.
Thank you, Satpati. Firstly, I'd like to thank ISCS for inviting me to present at this webinar. Just a quick word about my company and some of our firsts in solar. My interest with solar started with when I was a Chevening Scholar at London School of Economics in 1997, when Kyoto Protocol was signed. From Kyoto to Paris, it has been a long journey for solar and for me personally. My company, Sri Shakti Alternative Energy, was incubated by IFC Washington, and we did some great initiatives between 2000 to 2008, and survived a bankruptcy in 2008 to see the market transformation in the form of National Solar Mission. We are also developing a solar park in Rajasthan under an MOU with the state government, and we are now in the off-grid space also, and recently won a grant award from the Pace Setter Fund, jointly funded by MNRE and US State Department, for remote monitoring of solar pumps and off-grid solar plants. Sorry. Just about a year ago, India announced its INDCs on the occasion of Mahatma Gandhi's birth anniversary. And this weekend, India will be ratifying the Paris Agreement and presenting the ratification papers to the UN Secretary General. We are symbolically, we are using the simplicity and frugality of Mahatma Gandhi and his legacy to mark our country's commitment to sustainable development. So, talking about targets, my mind goes back to a flashback to last year, where the big question, there was a lot of skepticism about India's targets and whether these are achievable. And at a similar webinar, I addressed these questions. Will India develop 100 gigawatts by solar? And the power minister said, I want to kill 10 birds with one stone. Can you do it? And I relied on the statistics of International Energy Agency, IEA, to justify this. IEA had prepared a roadmap in 2010, wherein they expected a cumulative capacity of 210 gigawatts by 2020, and this was achieved a full 5 years earlier. And now they prepared a new solar roadmap in 2014, and the target for 2020 has been revised to 420 gigawatts, double of what was foreseen in the 2010 roadmap. And in this same roadmap, IEA in 2014, before India announced its targets, had forecasted 142 gigawatts by 2030 and 575 gigawatts by 2050 for India in a high renewable energy scenario. So I think we need to see the target of 100 gigawatts against this background. So, I mean, this analysis by IEA was based on a bottoms-up times model, that is the integrated market allocation energy flow optimization model system, which is which uses the cost of fuels and their availability to meet energy demands. I think even these estimates don't take into account the sharp declines we see in the solar module prices, and then every time the module prices dip, solar soars. And that was my latest tweet today. So, I mean, we've seen the breakup of the target. I think these are pretty much the same, except I'd like to probably emphasize that a 25 gigawatt target has been taken by India's largest generator, NTPC, and the solar park capacity, which was 20 gigawatts a while ago, is going to be enhanced to 40 gigawatts, and another 20 gigawatt solar park capacity scheme is with the cabinet for approval. And they also got a million solar pumps target, and I don't know, this figure may be 3 million. And off-grid projects are also gaining significance. And the present projects commissioned is over 8 gigawatts and nearly 15 gigawatt in the pipeline. And the technologies being used in India largely are mono and polycrystalline solar, cadmium telluride thin film, 6 modules, but there are very few CSP projects. Then we have mostly fixed tilt, but seasonally adjustable tilt and single axis trackers are being increasingly deployed. The inverters are mostly retired, 3-phase, central, and string inverters. For hybrid inverters also for rooftop projects, and standalone off-grid inverters are used. We're beginning to see waterless robotic solutions also for panel clearing. Most of the utility scale plants are using plant-based SCADA system. That's more common than cloud-based performance monitoring. But automated data analytics is lacking. Then there are these net metering regulations are being adopted widely in many of the states, and along with forecasting and scheduling regulations. So, I mean, with these targets, what are the macroeconomic drivers? Danish has covered this, but quickly, we've been the fastest growing economy in the world for the last 2 years, and India rose position in attracting FDI inflows in 2015. This is not in absolute terms, but in terms of the growth of FDI inflows. And recently, World Economic Forum's Global Competitiveness Report places India at 39th position. This is an improvement from 71 rank in 2014, and in the last 2 years, each year, India improved its position by 16 notches. The World Bank's Ease of Doing Business Index, India ranks over 100 in that, but an improvement is expected with various reforms in the last 1 year and the forthcoming GST in 2017. Overall, in the last 2 years, interest rates have become lower. Inflation control is still a major concern, and current account deficit has been the lowest in years. So these are the macroeconomic drivers which can propel the 100 gigawatt target. It's not just a target, on account of INDCs or things like that. I think the overall economy is going to propel these targets. So even if there is any shortfall in this target, I think there are other great initiatives by the government. Government of India announced a goal for 100% electrical vehicles by 2030. An interministerial group has been formed with the ministers of power. He's also the Minister of Renewable Energy, Petroleum, Transport, and Environment ministers. The overarching ambition for this comes from the fact that India imports 80% of its oil and uses 50% of the forex earnings for oil imports. So, I mean, I think making electric vehicles, using electric vehicles makes a lot of sense, where we can reduce our trade imbalance. The other 50% in the forex earnings, which doesn't go for oil, almost all of it goes for gold imports. India is biggest importer of gold. So, and this EV drive, I see that it may have to be powered with solar, And about a couple of years ago, a study done by our company in Rajasthan determines a potential of about 20,000 megawatt of solar to displace 5% of the gas petrol used for cars and two-wheelers. I mean, this is because of the density of fossil fuels, and because of this, probably you're not going to see. It's obvious that it is not easy to replace fossil fuels. It's a question of energy density. And there are great innovations happening in providing solar power for agriculture. 30% of Indian electrical energy consumption is used for irrigation. And there are about 16 million pump sets, about 20% diesel. If the diesel pump sets are replaced, that's about 10,000 megawatt of solar PV capacity. And these pump sets are powered by rural feeders, and which have huge T&D losses and warrants distributed energy. But I think solutions for agriculture should be farmer-centric or citizen-centric rather than supply-centric solutions. All these years, we have supplied power to the farmers as a utility, and we have not looked at the efficiency of use. We have not looked at water conservation. So I think a more farmer-centric solution will bring about multiple bottom line impacts: power, water, enhanced livelihoods, doubling of farmers' incomes, which is one of the major goals of the government. There is also a lot of innovation and market transformation happening. International Solar Alliance is hosted in India. A green hub for renewable energy startups is coming up in Hyderabad with a collaboration with the University of Texas at Austin. The ministry also has a policy for renewable energy startups on the anvil. And there are initiatives like smart cities, smart villages, green buildings that provide impetus for renewables. So when we are seeing this rapid growth in India, what are the pitfalls of this rapid growth? Worldwide, performance of PV plants is not without its share of issues. This is mainly because many of the plants were constructed under extreme time pressures. Some EPC contractors had limited or no experience in solar PV, and some of the EPC contractors who undertook the O&M of the plants became financially distressed and neglected their O&M obligations. The story is no different in India, and a lot of people who are new to solar perceive O&M as a trivial matter when it comes to solar, which is exactly the opposite. And there have been boom and bust in the solar market. So, in India, with 5 years of megawatt solar plants in operation, experience is no different. And there is a study conducted by IIT Bombay on field performance and degradation of solar modules. A lot of issues like micro cracks, snail cracks, PID and all that. I think that's some cause for concern. India can learn from the experience of global market and plan to counter such shortcomings in advance. So for that, there's I want to talk a little bit about importance of performance monitoring and O&M. O&M is no more add-on to EPC. It's a critical component of the solar energy value chain and best outsourced to professional O&M contractors. We are one such professional O&M contractors in partnership with our partners in Greece, Electris, carries the longest period of financial impact throughout the plant life cycle, and O&M cost in NPV terms is about 15% of the overall plant cost. So the questions to answer is, what can we learn from the last 5 years of the utility market? How can banks and regulators assess plant performance? Can we have a common benchmarking for performance and experience sharing to avoid pitfalls? What role can professional bodies like ISES and SECI play to support the market growth, and what can we learn from the best practices and standards from Sunspec Alliance and Solar Power Europe. So in summary, 100 gigawatts of solar generation is clearly in sight. Agriculture, electric vehicles, market innovation and technology adoption hold the key to creating a sustainable market. Hopefully with these innovations we can avoid the boom and bust which other markets have seen. Global markets have hard lessons to offer on viability and sustainability. India should learn from those by adopting the best practices and standards. EPCs and developers must focus on capacity growth targets without neglecting O&M and performance issues. And off-grid generation is a driver which should become solution-centric, which should become citizen-centric or solution-centric rather than supply-centric. So that's all I have, and thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Mr. Satya. Now I would request Ms. Jennifer to initiate the question answers.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabindra, and thank you to all the speakers for your excellent talks. I think we've gotten quite a bit of questions, so we'll start with the beginning. And so we'll give those who just spoke, Satya, and a minute to catch your breath and get a drink of water, and we'll go back to Santosh, the questions that came in for you first. One of the first questions that came in was on the costs and how the costs are identified based on present costs. Are the costs identified based on present costs, or do you include further decline? And do you know the current storage costs for solar? Santosh.
Yeah, we do expect further decline in costs. In fact, right now, in fact, in the last couple of months, prices have fallen significantly as far as module prices are concerned. But we do expect a slightly longer-term cost decline trend. As far as storage costs are concerned, currently it's somewhere between 350 to 400 US dollars per kilowatt hour of storage capex. This translates to roughly 12 Indian rupees per kilowatt hour in terms of per unit of electricity which is stored and retrieved. Going forward, the view is that by around 2020, this storage costs may come down to about $200 per kilowatt hour, so roughly half of what it is today. So that's where we expect to see a big boost in adoption of storage in India. I hope that answers the question.
Great. There's a question here. You already wrote in the answer, but I think it's worth revisiting. What incentives will DISCOM get from residential grid-connected solar rooftop? And as the developer, EPC will target high tariff paying consumers. Is there any obligation to impose to them to the government? Could you just read your answer?
Yeah, sure. I think it's a good question, right now what the government is doing is looking to see how the DISCOMs can be encouraged and incentivized. So there is a sort of there's a discussion around how do you provide grants to DISCOMs to help them to get their networks ready to absorb solar. This comes to approximately around 30 odd lakhs per megawatt. That's the kind of cap, ceiling which has been being talked of to support the DISCOMs for rooftop solar. But in my view, we need to probably do more because today the subsidies are directed towards the consumer as far as rooftop solar is concerned. I think part of that subsidy needs to be directed to the DISCOM from the government. Because as far as the consumer is concerned, the economics does work out. They already have the benefit of net metering. So not all of them really need the full 30% subsidy, residential customers who get 30% subsidy. I would say that probably that has to be split, maybe half and half between the DISCOM and the consumer, if you really want DISCOMs to come forward and support it, is what I would say.
Okay, I think we'll move on to another question here for Vikas and Danish. How does the Yes Bank ensure return from solar rooftop residential customers, and what due diligence are mandatory to be done before approaching the bank? What schemes do you have to support new and upcoming EPCs, especially in the state of MH?
Yeah, hi, Danish. So, see, on the residential solar rooftop side, so as of now, we don't have any special targeted lending scheme, but yes, there is already, we do consider solar rooftop as part of a new home loan kind of an application. So that's something that we, that we can, factor. So for anybody who's going in for a new home loan, we would encourage them if you can factor the cost of the solar rooftop, which is typically a very small percentage of the overall home, of the overall capital cost of the house, any which way. So that's something that we can easily do. If you ask me from an industry perspective, I believe that the key thing from a rooftop returns perspective for a residential customer is that, and in order to ensure on the credit risk, it's extremely important that the rights of of the OPEX provider, or essentially the RESCO provider, are accepted by the DISCOM, which effectively means the rooftop net billing system has to be recognized by the utility, and therefore let's say assuming it's a 15-year or 20-year long-term agreement, the residential customer does not have an option to not pay the RESCO provider, without incurring significant penalties on its own electricity consumption from the grid. I think that's the basic business model looking at. In terms of schemes, once again, we do have lending lines to EPC companies. We do provide them fund-based and non-based on non-fund based limits, working capital as well as equipment, as well as long lines of capital. So once again, we would treat them as any other business, any other service-oriented business, business process. So we would encourage you to kind of reach out to your nearest bank, or reach out to us, and we'll connect with the right person.
Okay, thank you. Another question to address, favorable risk return profile seems to apply for utility scale solar rather than off-grid solar. How does Yes Bank and other financiers view distributed solar? Can we expect greater support?
Yes, so this is something that we have been studying, and we are kind of in the process of getting out a special kind of a product for it. I must admit that yes, there are challenges. We have funded distributed solar, but presently we have limited our credit exposure to only the larger IPP guys. So essentially, some of the larger IPP lending relationships that we have essentially extended those to their distributed projects as well. Some of those loans we have also covered under our priority sector coverage. We believe the biggest risk, especially on the lending side that we see, is distributed solar capacities tend to be a lot smaller, which effectively means that all those loan proposals cannot really reach the project finance team. So project finance teams are essentially headquartered out of, let's say, Delhi and Bombay, right? And they are used to, and there is an entire process of an owner's engineers, lender engineers, DPR, due diligence, project structuring. Now, unfortunately, for such a small amount of loans, all those checks and balances are extremely difficult because it doesn't make cost effort sense. So I think I think a lot of standardization needs to happen in that. Again, we believe that there is a huge opportunity for some of the service offerers to create a brand there. We believe distributed solar may actually go the equipment financing or the vendor financing route more than the RESCO financing, purely because of these challenges that we are talking about. So again, we have funded some of our clients, but we need to but again, most of that has tended to only go to the larger players in terms of project financing, or if it's an end user financing, that it's more of balance sheet financing and not really non-recourse project finance.
Okay. While we're on the topic of financing, there's another question here. What do you expect on financing sources? Is it more or less from all private sources, including international private institutions, or do you also expect public funding, risk heading, grants, etc., from institutions like the World Bank, the ADB, the Green Climate Fund?
No, I think so. I think so from the from an equity side, very clearly the funding sources have to be private. So they may be a company's own resources, they may be an international investors' capital, they may be a private equity guys. But yes, equity will come on private. This sector has already, we believe the sector has already reached a tipping point where it doesn't need subsidies anymore. And this government is also very clear that they are not going to announce any subsidy schemes which the exchequer cannot support fiscally. So I think so very clear. We don't expect much grants, etc., to come in. At least on the utility scale, there are definitely not. On the distributed solar, yes, there are certain schemes still available. But I believe any entrepreneur looking to make a long-term business case in India has to have its own sources of funding, and the grants, etc., really, are really not available. On the debt side, yes, there are the public financial institutions like you have a DFIs like IREDA, PFC, REC, which still would give you loans at at very attractive terms. I believe you can term that as preferential lending. But again, from a utility scale solar, this is a private capital game now.
Okay, thank you. Let's turn to a few questions for Satya now. There were quite a few. First of all, most of the matured renewable energy markets are now focused on grid integration, power to gas in Europe, batteries in North America. What do you think India will need to go ahead, given the current grid constraints? And how does the grid operator in India getting ready to operate the grid with such a large penetration of renewables? Satya, can you address some of those grid issues?
Yes, yes, thank you, Jenny. Yes, clearly, I think there is a case for distributed energy, and solar intrinsically is a distributed energy source. So we should promote more distributed energy. We have a large target for solar parks, but leaving aside the target for rooftop systems is also, in fact, even more ambitious. So I think this will help the distribution companies to actually trim down their transmission distribution losses, and both on the residential side and also on the rural agricultural feeders. So these are definitely the directions in which future solar should develop. We have done quite well with the low-hanging fruit, so-called utility scale megawatt size projects. But I think, increasing integration of solar into the grid should come from distributed solar.
Okay, thanks. There's another question about a specific technology. One of the audience members is asking, won't solar feeders connected to conventional pumps be a more economical and efficient option in comparison to solar pumps?
I definitely agree with that. I think where the number of pumps connected to a feeder are less, or if they are far off, located far away from the feeder, it would make sense to go for a standalone solar pump. But a combination of solar plant to feed that particular agricultural feeder, which may be like something like 1 megawatt to 3 megawatt, that with energy efficiency, like replacing the pump sets with efficient pump sets, that can be a huge opportunity. I think maybe the connected load of agricultural feeders in India may be as high as 100,000 megawatt. And this is basically intermittent load. Today, these agricultural feeders are being supplied power in the middle of the night for about 7 to 9 hours in various states. But with solar, the generation from solar perfectly matches the requirement of irrigation, because when there is monsoon in India, you don't need to use the groundwater. When the sun is shining, that's when you need the irrigation. So I think both make sense, but in some places you may have to use solar pumps. But I think a very large growth or capacity can be achieved by planning these solar agricultural feeders and improvement in the replacement of the old electrical pump sets.
Okay. Another question again on intermittency nature, the intermittency nature of renewables. The intermittency nature of renewables is a challenge for the grid operator. We need to have a proper forecasting tools to handle this. Is the grid operator getting ready to handle this? If you or any of the other panelists can address that.
Yeah, I'll answer that. Yes, I gave a reply that presently some of the solar plants are also being asked to back down, even though solar is must run. In future, I hope it will be the thermal plants which will back down, as Santosh Kamath presented from his simulations, and there's a case for that, because when the thermal plant backs down, there is fuel saving and emission savings. So that should be what should be regulated in future. In terms of forecasting and scheduling, today the regulations are very liberal. I think the operators, the plant owners are being a chance to get used to these tools. But I think we will require very good data analytics combined with weather prediction models, next day and hourly forecasts. So it's going to be very challenging, and I think it requires very good meteorologists and very good data scientists.
Yeah. Okay. This is a question to anyone who would like to answer. Can anybody elaborate on India's panel manufacturing capacity and its role in the 100 gigawatts goal? Are there any financing activities in terms of ramping up manufacturing, and are there any upcoming production standards by the MNRE? I'll open this to anyone. Danish, were you trying to answer that?
Yeah. Okay. So I am not, I don't have ready access to the latest statistics, but I'm sure those can be arranged. It is fair to say that yes, the government did have a good push towards domestic content requirement, from a panel and the cell manufacturing side. However, purely coming from a lending and an equity investment perspective, we do think that these sectors will remain challenged in India, especially in light of the recent steep fall in module and cell prices that we have seen from overseas, and with the China overcapacity, these sectors will remain stretched. We are also aware of the recent setback India had at the WTO, so therefore again one will have to look at in what ways can the Indian government continue supporting the domestic manufacturing industry. We do see a very healthy kind of an ecosystem developing for the balance of systems. We have seen a lot of Indian companies, developing expertise in that. We have also seen some of the international players again on the inverter side, etc., setting up capacities in India under the Make in India scheme, etc., in order to further bring down the cost. But on the cells and the module side, it's still a tough call given the prices and the overcapacity that China currently has.
Okay. Another question about manufacturing that came in. So if anyone else can provide some information on the manufacturing side, Santosh, do you have any? I think you unmuted yourself.
Yeah, I think I just lost the audio. What is the question? Can you just repeat that, please?
The question is on the manufacturing side and how India will ramp up the manufacturing to meet the target of 100 gigawatts, and will India be able to achieve its target?
Yeah, right. So I think a lot of foreign companies have announced interest to invest in Indian manufacturing, including Chinese, including US and a few others. So there is interest. I think we just need to probably wait for the right timing. Right now, looking at Chinese overcapacity, it's a bit of a concern. But some of them are on their way in setting up manufacturing. But I think time will tell, whether the competitiveness will develop or not, as far as India is concerned.
Okay. And what?
May I add?
Go ahead. Yes.
Jennifer, may I add to the manufacturing answer?
Yes.
I think the present capacity in India is around 2 or 2.5 gigawatts, and it's growing. Manufacturers like MB Solar, Liquid Solar are adding capacity, but this is still, just about half of what is the capacity of the world's largest players like GW and Trina Solar and all that. So I think there is an issue with the economies of scale. And, I think India is probably lagging behind in this generation of solar technologies. And I think personally I feel the country should invest in R&D and innovate on the next generation of solar technologies and catch that wave.
Okay. Well, the questions are still flowing in. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. I know the speakers are under time restraints, and we appreciate all the time they've already put into the session today. Obviously, the discussion can continue going. There's a lot of things we haven't been able to address, and also in terms of technologies, the thermal and the CSP side of things. But we appreciate all the questions and all the answers that the panelists have been able to provide today and your excellent presentations. We really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and expertise with us today, and thank you especially to Rabindra for helping me put this webinar together and organizing the speakers. This has been a really informative session. I hope everyone has enjoyed it. We are still collecting the presentations from the panelists, and we'll post those up on our website and on the members area. If you use social media, we encourage you to connect with us and to continue the discussion and continue to stay tuned to the global status of renewables. Like I said, you can get on LinkedIn and to our group there and see if connect with others about continuing the discussion. Finally, I want to thank our audience for joining us today, and especially those in India. We look forward to welcoming you to another webinar. As I said, we're going to post the recording in a couple hours on our website. Please check the website and the members area. And if you have any trouble logging in, you can contact us for that information. If you have any comments or feedback, we welcome you to share this with us so we can continue to improve our webinar service for you. And we welcome you to participate in the survey that will be launched right after this. So without further ado, I'd just like to say thank you again. Rabindra, I leave the last word to you, and wish everyone a pleasant weekend, and thank you again.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Jenny. I would like to thank profusely Mr. Santosh Kamath for his very elaborate presentations and giving oversight into the Indian present scenario and how it's geared to achieve the set target. Also, my thanks to Mr. Vikas and Mr. Danis Verma for the excellent presentation on the financial scenario, which gives a positive aspect of achieving the set target by the Government of India. Last but not the least, Mr. Satya, you have excellent presentations on the other aspects and insight into the different technologies and aspect needed. And I'd like to thank you all for your time taken to make this happen. And on behalf of ISAS, we'd like to thank you all for your time and efforts to bring this to our august audience around the world. Thank you and have a good day.
Thank you, Saptati. Thank you, Jennifer.